Hello, and thanks for visiting Secrets and Shadows. Please comment on where you are listening from and share any ideas you may have for upcoming episodes. Also, please like and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. And now for our story, Operation Exodus. The first shot cracked across the city like thunder. I ducked lower in the back seat of the battered taxi as people scattered from the market square, their baskets of fruit rolling across the pavement, trampled under fleeing feet. A plume of smoke rose from the presidential palace 3 blocks away, black against the late afternoon sun. I'd been in war zones before. Hell, I'd lived in them for most of my adult life. But this felt different. Not a war fought by armies with supply chains and rules, but a country tearing itself apart with teeth and claws. Militias with rifles older than their fathers. Soldiers who'd switched sides twice in the last week. The kind of chaos where foreigners became bargaining chips. My name is Cole Mercer. I used to wear a uniform, fight for flags and governments that pretended they were better than this. Now I worked for money, and the shadows in Dubai that paid me didn't care how bloody my hands got as long as I delivered results. This time, the job was simple on paper. Find Elena Hale and get her out of San Cazador before the whole country collapsed. Her father, a billionaire with friends in dark places, had wired more money than I'd ever seen into the agency's accounts for one outcome only: his daughter alive. The driver's hands were shaking on the wheel as he pushed the taxi through side streets. Every corner felt like an ambush waiting to happen. Burned-out cars marked the last firefight, bullet holes still fresh. I checked my pistol, made sure the spare magazines were seated tight on my belt. We slowed near a squat concrete building painted with a red cross. The clinic. Children sat on the steps, their clothes dusty but intact, eyes wide as they watched the chaos beyond the gates. A woman stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, her hands stained with blood that wasn't her own. Even from a distance, she carried herself with stubborn defiance. Elena Hale. I paid the driver in cash and stepped out. The air was thick with smoke and the copper tang of burned metal. My boots crunched glass as I crossed the street. The woman's gaze found me, sharp and questioning, but she didn't flinch when I approached. "Dr. Hale," I said. My voice carried more authority than warmth. "Your father sent me." She didn't look relieved. If anything, her jaw tightened. Of course he did. He thinks money can solve everything. She turned back toward the clinic, gesturing for me to follow. "You should know, Mr. Mercer," I said. "Mr. Mercer," she continued, "I'm not leaving, not while there are patients bleeding in those beds." I followed her inside. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and sweat. Dozens of locals were packed onto cots, some groaning in pain, others silent, too exhausted to cry. Nurses moved quickly between them, their eyes darting toward the windows every time another gunshot echoed outside. "You don't have a choice," I told her, keeping my tone flat. "This country's a powder keg. Foreigners are already targets. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's when." She spun on me, eyes blazing. "These people don't have a way out. You expect me to walk away because my father is rich enough to hire men like you. I chose to be here. I chose to stay when things got bad. I'd been briefed she was stubborn. The reports didn't capture how fierce she was. It was going to be a problem." Another burst of gunfire rattled outside, a window shattered in the next room, and one of the children screamed. I moved without thinking, grabbing the kid and pulling him to cover as glass rained down. No one was hit, but the fear was thick enough to choke on. Elena saw it too. Her hands trembled for just a second before she steadied herself. She looked at me differently now, not with trust, but with the recognition that maybe I wasn't just some mercenary her father had bought. "We're out of time," I said, voice low but firm. "This clinic isn't a fortress. The militias will overrun this neighborhood by nightfall. You want to save lives. You won't do it lying in a shallow grave here. Come with me. We'll figure out what we can do on the way." Her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the war inside her, between duty and survival. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But when another explosion rumbled through the streets, she grabbed a medical bag and slung it over her shoulder. It wasn't agreement, but it was a start. The morning broke not with birdsong, but with the crack of gunfire somewhere beyond the hills. Short, controlled bursts, Military weapons, not the old hunting rifles most locals carried. Cole was already awake when the noise reached the clinic. He sat at the kitchen table, cleaning the pistol he'd bought off a smuggler the day before, when Elena stormed in, pale but determined. "They're closer," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook as she poured herself water. Cole slid the weapon's slide back into place with a sharp click. "Closer means less time. We need to move." She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms like a barrier. "I'm not abandoning them. These people don't have anywhere to go." Cole studied her, the kind of long, level look that had once unsettled soldiers under his command. "The militias don't care. If they reach this village, no one walks away." Her chin lifted. "Then we take them with us." He almost laughed, but stopped himself. The fire in her eyes wasn't naivete. It was conviction, the sort that wouldn't bend under logic alone. He'd seen it before in men who died rather than give up ground. "We can't move an entire village through roadblocks and patrols," he said, "but we can move you. That's the job." "That's your job," she corrected. "Mine is making sure those kids don't get left behind." From the next room came the sounds of children, nervous whispers, the scrape of chairs, a muffled sob. Cole set the pistol down. He didn't like the sound outside or inside. "We'll compromise," he said. "I'll scout routes. If there's a chance to bring some with us, we'll try. But if the shooting reaches here—" He met her gaze. "We go." No arguments. Her silence was answer enough. Not agreement. Just refusal to push back further for now. By midday, smoke rose in the distance. Villagers clustered around the clinic, whispering in tense Spanish. Cole kept to the edges, scanning the tree line, mapping possible escape routes in his head. Elena moved among them, checking wounds, handing out water, pretending everything was normal. But the way her eyes darted to the horizon told him she knew the same thing he did. The war was moving faster than either of them had hoped. Late afternoon, an old truck rattled up the dirt road and stopped at the edge of the village. Men jumped out, armed with rusted rifles and machetes. They weren't soldiers. Militia, by the way they carried themselves, sloppy but dangerous. Cole's hand went to his pistol, instinct tightening every muscle. "Who are they?" Eleanor whispered, standing beside him. "Trouble," Cole said. He grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the clinic as shouts broke out. The villagers froze, uncertain, until one of the militia fired a shot into the air. The sound ripped through the dusty street like a signal. Things had changed. Cole's eyes scanned the men, counting weapons, measuring their swagger. They weren't here for diplomacy. His jaw tightened. It was starting, and it was happening faster than he'd planned. The knock wasn't a polite request. It rattled the hinges like the butt of a rifle stock slamming against the metal. Cole's body shifted instinctively, weight low, hand brushing the Glock at his hip as he leaned into the wall by the door. Eleanor froze in the middle of the room, her eyes wide, fingers clenched tight around the edge of her medical bag. "Stay quiet," Cole whispered, voice low and calm, though his pulse was a hard, steady drum in his chest. Another knock, harder this time. Then voices. 2 men, maybe 3, their words muffled but the tone clear. Authority mixed with threat. Cole could almost hear the sneer behind their accents. "Militia patrol," he said, barely moving his lips. "They'll want money, women, or both." Eleanor's face tightened. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. He saw her swallow her fear, force it down into some dark place. He respected that, but fear or no fear, she was a liability if she didn't follow his lead. The door creaked as the latch strained under a shove. Cole made his choice. He pulled the Glock, chambered around with a soft click, then moved to the side of the frame where the angle was tight. When the door swung open, 2 men stumbled into the gloom. Both carried battered AKs, uniforms mismatched with cheap sneakers, eyes sharp and predatory. A third waited outside, pacing like a hyena. "Buenas noches," one of them said, grinning, scanning the room. His gaze snagged on Elena, and the grin widened into something uglier. Cole stepped forward out of the shadows, the gun steady in his hand, and the smile died on the man's face. "This house is empty," Cole said evenly. "You've made a mistake." For a beat, silence stretched. The second man's weapon twitched upward, nerves or instinct, it didn't matter which. Cole squeezed the trigger once, the suppressed shot thudding like a hammer. The man dropped without a sound, his rifle clattering against the floorboards. The first soldier froze, eyes flicking between the body and the muzzle aimed square at his chest. Outside, the third man shouted, alarm cutting the night air. Cole grabbed the stunned soldier by the shirt, yanked him inside, and used his body as cover as bullets shredded the doorway. The wood splintered, chips flying. Elena dropped low behind the table, hands over her head. Cole's movements were clean, efficient. He shoved his human shield toward the window and fired twice more, the third man outside collapsing into the dirt. Silence, heavy, awful silence. The last soldier whimpered, crumpled on the floor. Cole disarmed him, kicked the AK across the room, and leaned close. Your friends are gone. Run, and maybe you live. Come back, and you don't. The man scrambled out the broken doorway like a rat chased by fire. Cole turned back, breathing steady now, gun still in his hand. Elena was staring at him, pale but composed, her eyes burning with a mix of fear, anger, and something else he couldn't read. You just killed 2 men, she whispered. They were going to kill us, or worse, Cole said. His voice carried no apology. This is how it works here. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she nodded, slow, deliberate, like someone forcing themselves to accept an impossible truth. Cole holstered the Glock. Pack your things, Doctor. We're moving tonight. Noise like that. This place isn't safe anymore. Outside, in the broken silence of the town, dogs began to bark. They left before the dust settled. Cole moved first, clearing the alley behind the safe house, his pistol drawn but low, scanning shadows, corners, rooftops. The night was alive now. Dogs barking, shutters slamming, voices carrying as news of gunfire rippled through the village. In places like this, violence was a beacon, and predators always came to look. Stay close, he murmured, glancing back at Elena. She had thrown her medical bag over her shoulder, her jaw tight, eyes locked on his back, as if she'd tethered herself to him. Good. At least she wasn't arguing anymore. They threaded through the narrow streets, the buildings leaning in close, walls pocked with bullet holes and spray-painted slogans of militias staking their claim. Smoke lingered in the air, the acrid stench of burned tires drifting in from somewhere beyond. Cole led her down an alley that spat them out near the northern road. He paused, crouched low behind a crumbling wall and peered ahead. 50 yards up, a checkpoint glowed under a haze of diesel fumes and halogen lamps. 3 pickup trucks straddled the road, mounted with machine guns welded to the beds. Militia fighters lounged around, rifles slung, their laughter brittle and cruel. They had barrels burning, bottles in their hands, and the jittery restlessness of men with too much power and not enough discipline. Elena crouched beside him. There's no way through. There's always a way, Cole said, eyes never leaving the patrol. He studied the layout, noting patterns, the guard who wandered too far when he smoked, the others distracted by a dice game, the weakest point in their line of sight. He scanned left. A drainage culvert ran parallel to the road, half choked with mud and garbage. It reeked, but it would get them past. Maybe. You see that ditch? He asked. Eleanor followed his finger, nose wrinkling. That's disgusting. Yeah, it's also our best shot. She hesitated, but he didn't give her time to argue. He vaulted the wall, crouched low, and jogged to the ditch. After a beat, she followed, sliding down the slope into the muck with a muted groan. They crawled inch by inch, the stench clinging to their clothes, their skin. Above, the laughter of the militia carried on, oblivious. Cole moved like a predator, deliberate and controlled, every sound measured. Elena mirrored him, surprisingly steady despite the filth. Halfway through, headlights flared behind them. A truck rumbled onto the road, slowing as it reached the checkpoint. Men shouted greetings. Cole froze, mud soaking into his chest, and put a hand out to stop Elena. The truck idled overhead, voices rising, boots crunching on gravel as fighters circled. Elena's breathing quickened. He reached back, squeezed her arm once. Silent reassurance. She steadied, matched his stillness. Minutes crawled past, then the truck lurched forward, rolled through, and the noise faded into the night. Cole exhaled slowly. Move, he whispered. They emerged on the far side of the checkpoint, filthy but alive. Cole pulled Elena out of the ditch, and she stumbled into the brush, wiping at her face with shaking hands. "I smell like a sewer," she muttered, but there was a faint tremor of relief in her voice. "Smelling bad beats being dead," Cole said. He scanned the horizon, hills rising against the faint silver of moonlight. Somewhere beyond those hills lay the rendezvous point. Between here and there, a country tearing itself apart. Elena followed his gaze. "How far do we have to go?" Cole adjusted his pack, eyes cold and focused. Far enough. The hills were a patchwork of shadows and moonlight, the ground uneven and slick with mud from the last rain. Cole led the way, crouched low, eyes scanning every ridge, every dark hollow. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves could be a scout, a militia soldier lying in wait. Behind him, Eleanor followed, limping slightly from the long crawl through the ditch, her medical bag bouncing against her side. She was quiet, thoughtful, and he noticed how often her gaze drifted toward the villages they passed. Burning rooftops, families clutching what they could carry, children crying quietly in the dark. "Stop," she whispered suddenly. Cole froze. A dozen meters ahead, a small column of refugees moved along a ridge. Men, women, children, clutching bundles, dragging what little they could save. The militia hadn't found them yet, but they would soon. "They need help," Eleanor said, eyes wide. We can't do anything," Cole interrupted, voice low, controlled. "If we stop, they'll get every one of us killed." Her gaze met his, sharp and insistent. "There has to be a way. A shortcut, a diversion, something." He shook his head. "This isn't a charity mission. We're not saving the world tonight. We're saving one person, and that's already too much risk. We stop and we die. We all die." She clenched her fists, biting her lip. For a moment, he thought she might argue further, but then she exhaled sharply and nodded, her jaw set. She trusted him, at least for now. But the fire in her eyes didn't die. It just simmered, waiting. Cole moved again, crouched lower this time, guiding her behind rocks and low shrubs. He scanned the valley below. Smoke curls marked burned-out homes. Fires still flickered where farmers had fled too late. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire cracked, sharp and rhythmic, close enough to make him tense. "Why do you do this?" he asked quietly, mostly to fill the silence. "Risk yourself for people who'll never even know your name?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the strap of her bag, keeping her voice calm. "Because someone has to. And maybe because someone might have done it for me once. I can't walk away now. Not while I can still do something." Cole didn't respond. Words didn't fix bullets or broken bones, and he'd long since learned to let convictions ride alongside survival. They rounded a bend and came upon a shallow creek. Water ran sluggishly, carrying debris from the villages above. Cole scanned both banks before lowering himself into the water. Eleanor followed. Halfway across, the first distant shouts reached them. Militia voices, closer than he liked. He motioned for her to hurry. They scrambled up the opposite bank, mud and leaves clinging to them, hearts hammering. Once they reached cover in a small copse of trees, Cole crouched, breathing steady but deep, hand on his pistol. Elena sank beside him, wiping mud from her face, but her eyes held an intensity that made him look away. "We keep moving," he said finally. "Every minute we stop, the risk doubles. There's a road, maybe 2 kilometers from here. From there, we have a shot at reaching the rendezvous point before sunrise." Eleanor nodded. She said nothing else, but he could feel the tension simmering between them. Not anger, not fear exactly, but something unspoken, electric. Something that might ignite if they survived the night. Cole rose first, scanning the tree line one last time before stepping out into the darkness. Eleanor followed, silent, resolute. They were no longer just running. They were moving through a country at war, each step a gamble, each breath borrowed. And somewhere ahead, the militia waited. The road stretched before them, a ribbon of dirt cutting through the hills, pale in the moonlight. Cole dropped into a shallow ditch along the side, motioning for Elena to do the same. Up ahead, a faint glow marked the checkpoint. Torches, a roaring fire in a barrel, and 3 militia fighters sprawled across the dirt, rifles leaning against their shoulders. Cole studied them carefully. 2 were distracted, laughing, tossing a dice game. The third had a cigarette dangling from his lips, scanning the road. Patrol dogs slouched near the fire. One wrong move, one cough or snap of a twig, and it would be over. Elena's hand brushed against his arm. "How do we get past them?" she whispered, eyes wide. Cole's jaw tightened. "Slow, quiet. Follow my lead." He dropped to his stomach, dragging himself forward along the ditch, eyes locked on the gaps between shadows. Elena mirrored his movements, awkward but determined. They reached a point where the ditch ran parallel to the road, about 15 meters from the fire. Cole peeked over the edge. 2 of the men had wandered toward a pile of crates. Good. The third looked down the road, but his gaze flicked at the fire more than anything. Timing was everything. "Now," Cole muttered. They slipped from cover, moving fast but low, Eleanor's hand brushing his shoulder to keep pace. The crunch of gravel made his teeth grind, but luck stayed with them. The militia hadn't noticed. Halfway past, a dog lifted its head, sniffing the air. Cole froze, heart hammering. The dog barked once. Elena jumped back, eyes wide. Cole gritted his teeth, pivoted, and flung a rock into the brush 30 meters away. The dog bolted toward the sound. He motioned for Elena to keep going. The last stretch was the most dangerous. Open ground, a single tree for cover. Cole timed it with the laughter of the men and made a break for it. Elena followed, stumbling over roots, barely keeping up. A gun clicked from the checkpoint. One of the militia had noticed, but Cole slammed himself to the ground behind the tree, pulled Elena down, and fired a warning shot into the dirt near them. The men shouted, barking commands, but the shadows swallowed them. Cole waited, listening to their frustrated yells until the noise receded. They moved again, faster now, sprinting along a hidden ridge that led them out of sight. Eleanor gasped, wiping sweat and mud from her forehead. "I thought we were done for." "We're not done," Cole said, scanning the road behind them. "This was just the first obstacle. There'll be more. Worse." She swallowed, nodding, but the way her hand brushed against his arm as she adjusted her bag didn't escape him. Neither of them said anything, but tension hummed in the air. Part fear, part something else, neither was ready to name. Cole's mind was already on the next stage, the mountains ahead, the narrow passes, and the second checkpoint he'd spotted on the satellite maps. Every mile was a gamble, and every choice could mean life or death. And he had to keep her alive. Because right now, survival wasn't just about him. It was about Elena, and her stubborn conviction that she wouldn't leave anyone behind. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged silhouettes against the faint glow of dawn. Cole scanned the path ahead, a narrow dirt track hugging a steep cliffside, loose rocks threatening to tumble at the slightest misstep. One wrong move, and they'd fall miles into the valley below. Eleanor's steps were steady, but Cole could feel her tension radiating like heat. Every so often, she glanced over her shoulder, eyes wide at the mist curling through the peaks. He didn't blame her. This pass had seen more than its share of travelers disappear, ambushed by militias who knew every bend and ledge. Halfway up the trail, he stopped, crouched behind a boulder. Up ahead, 2 pickup trucks blocked the path. Militias. He counted 6 fighters, rifles ready, their chatter rough and easy. One leaned against the truck, tossing a coin, while another kept scanning the horizon. "Elena," he murmured, "we can't go through the front. Not this time." She nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "We go around." "More like under." He pointed to a narrow crevice between the rocks. "Follow me. Keep low, step where I step." The passage was tight, scraping elbows, brushing against jagged stone. Cole went first, testing each foothold, hand steady on the gun at his side. Eleanor followed, careful, whispering curses as her backpack snagged on protruding rocks. The militia ahead shouted suddenly. A patrol returning from the ridge had spotted movement. Cole froze, hand on Elena's shoulder, pulling her down into the shadows. He counted, 4 men now scanning the crevice area. Too many for a direct confrontation. "Wait for my signal," he whispered. Then he crawled forward, pistol drawn, ear close to the stone. Timing, patience, movement. He had to get them past without alerting the militia completely. A loose rock skidded beneath his palm. One of the men twitched, but their attention was still on the ridge. Cole signaled Eleanor, "Crawl." Inch by inch, they pressed through, muscles trembling, hearts hammering. Suddenly, a shout from above. One militia fighter had noticed the shadow moving in the rocks. Cole's instincts snapped into overdrive. He rolled slightly, aimed, and fired a warning shot just over the man's head. Shouts erupted, the militia scrambling, rifles barking, but Cole pushed Elena forward. They reached a small ledge above the main road. The militia below searched frantically, but Cole and Elena were gone. For the first time since leaving the clinic, Elena allowed herself a short, relieved laugh. "You're insane," she whispered, gripping the ledge. "Sanity doesn't survive here," Cole said, eyes scanning for the next threat. "We keep moving. The border's not far, every minute counts." She looked at him then, really looked, mud-smeared, tense, yet alive. He noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she brushed dirt from her face. Something passed between them, trust, acknowledgement, maybe something more, but neither spoke it aloud. Survival came first. Cole adjusted his pack and motioned forward. "We've got a long way to go. Mountains don't care who we are. Keep up." Eleanor followed, silent now, resolute. Each step forward was another gamble, another measure of their will to survive. And Cole knew this. One misstep, one mistake, and the mountains would claim them. But for now, they were still moving, still alive. The sun was low, bleeding red across the horizon, casting the mountains in sharp contrast. Cole led Elena down the final slope toward the main road, eyes scanning every turn, every shadow. The militia checkpoint that controlled the pass to the border waited ahead, fortified with scrap metal and old sandbags. "Elena," Cole muttered, crouching behind a boulder, "this is it. One chance, one window. We slip past or we get trapped." Her breath came in short gasps, but she nodded. No words, only determination. He liked that. Ahead, 2 trucks blocked the path, guns trained toward the mountains. The men leaned casually, but every twitch told him they were ready to kill. Cole checked his gear, pistol, spare magazines, combat knife. All accounted for. Then he glanced at Elena. She carried only her medical bag, but her eyes were sharp, alert, not afraid. Not yet. "Follow me and don't make a sound until I say," he whispered. They moved low, using rocks and shrubs for cover. A dog barked below, and Cole froze, pressing Elena into the brush. The militia shouted, rifles scanning. The dog's bark faded. Timing, patience. They reached a narrow gap beside a sandbag wall. Cole peeked. 2 men were distracted, tossing a coin. Perfect. He gave Elena a nod. Step by step, they slipped past. Halfway across, a soldier turned suddenly. Cole reacted instantly, slamming the butt of his pistol into the man's temple. The soldier crumpled silently. Eleanor stifled a gasp, but didn't falter. The final stretch was open ground. Cole's heart hammered. He sprinted, dragging Eleanor behind the wall of his body. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets spitting dirt and stone. He kept low, moving fast, instinct guiding every step. "Go!" he shouted. Elena ran, adrenaline sharp. The last militiaman raised his rifle. Cole fired twice. A bullet hit the dirt in front of him. The second glanced the man's shoulder. He went down. They collapsed behind a ridge, chests heaving. Ahead, the border fence glimmered in the sunset. Freedom, or at least safety, was close. Eleanor turned to him, eyes wide, mud-streaked and alive. I didn't think we'd make it." "You almost didn't," Cole said, voice rough. "But you kept up. Smart, fast, stubborn, good traits." Her lips quirked, half a smile. "You're insane, but I owe you my life." He didn't answer. There wasn't time for anything but moving. Survival came first. But for a moment, as they crouched behind the ridge, he allowed himself to notice her. The determination in her eyes, the way she'd trusted him to lead, the unspoken bond forming between them. The border was just ahead, and for the first time in hours, or days, they could see a way out. Cole checked his pistol one last time, then gestured forward. "Let's finish this." They rose together, ready to cross into safety, into the next chapter of whatever awaited beyond the mountains. The border checkpoint was chaos. Refugees crowded the area, soldiers shouting, children clinging to parents, luggage and belongings scattered in the dust. Cole led Elena through the crush, keeping her close, eyes scanning for threats. Every instinct screamed at him. Anyone could be an enemy. Any movement could trigger violence. Elena glanced around, taking in the scene. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. Her voice was low, awe mixed with horror. Cole didn't answer. There was no time for commentary. He guided her to a small private entrance pre-arranged by the agency. A jeep waited, driver nodding to him. He pulled Elena in, scanning the crowd one last time. "Go," he said to the driver, and the engine roared to life. As the jeep sped away from the border, the tension slowly began to unwind. Eleanor sank back against the seat, eyes closing for a brief moment, relief washing over her. Cole stayed alert, but allowed himself a glance. She was alive, both of them were. That was enough for now. A short flight later, they landed at a private airstrip. Waiting there was Victor Hale, his face sharp, expression unreadable, but relief flickering in his eyes the moment he saw his daughter. "Elena," he said, voice low, almost strangled, "you're safe." She stepped out, brushing mud from her clothes, glancing at Cole. He stayed behind her, hands loose at his sides. She didn't smile. She never really smiled, but she nodded at him. "Thank you," she said, voice quiet, carrying more weight than any words could capture. Cole's jaw tightened. He inclined his head once. "It's my job," he said simply. Victor Hale's gaze flicked between them, noting the quiet connection, the unspoken understanding. But he said nothing. That wasn't his place. Elena turned back to Cole, her eyes holding his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. There was something there, tension, attraction, gratitude, but neither of them acted on it. The world they had survived was still too raw, the stakes too high. Cole finally stepped back, letting father and daughter reunite. As he walked away toward the waiting plane, he allowed himself a rare thought. Sometimes survival was all you needed, and nothing else mattered. He didn't look back as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky blood red over the mountains. The mission was complete. Eleanor was alive. The world was still broken, chaotic, violent. But for now, he had done his job. And that was enough.